Hey, horror fans, welcome back to Jay versus Horror. And today, guys, we're going to be talking about the top 10 films of 2010. This is our halfway point on our journey to name the top 10 films of the last 20 years, guys. We have reached the middle, and it's been a lot of fun. I'm going to try to make these go a little faster than I have been in the past, maybe not do so many honorable mentions. I will tell you guys when I get to the honorable mentions, so if you're done listening, at that point, you can just be done. All right. At number 10, guys, I have a very fun movie from 2010 titled Tucker and Dale versus Evil. It's a black comedy horror film directed by Eli Craig, written by Craig and Morgan Jurgensen, and starring Tyler Labine, Alan Tudyk, and Katrina Bowden. It's a fun movie where these two guys just kind of get caught up in a misunderstanding, right? These two simple, sweet guys who just happen to be country guys are mistaken for violent rednecks, and hilarity ensues, right? Now, this is a very fun movie. I like all the little accidents that occur that lead to Tucker and Dale being seen as these, redneck hills have eyes type killers. There's also another story running through here of a actual massacre that did occur, so we get an actual bad guy or antagonist, I would say, which made it for me where it wasn't just a comedy; it's also a play on horror movies. But yeah, they go at all the old slasher and cannibal and stuff like that cliches, and they have a lot of fun with it. This is one of my favorite horror comedies, and I have it at number 10 for 2010. Tucker and Dale versus Evil. At number 9, I have Rare Exports. It's very rare for me to ever mention a Christmas story when it comes to horror. To me, there's just not a lot of great ones, and when they do try to make one, it's so pigeonholed into what it is that it's rarely great. Like, a lot of people will say Die Hard's not a Christmas movie. A lot of people will say Die Hard is a Christmas movie. The reason we have that debate is because Christmas is a backdrop to a story that has nothing to do with Christmas, other than Christmas being a plot device that gets us to the story. So I think if there were more horror films like that were just kind of based around the fact that they happen on Christmas coincidentally, and less about the fact like that it's all centered on Christmas, we would have better films. And there are a few out there like that. Don't get me wrong. This one is fun for me because it's a Finnish film and it has a lot of Santa Claus legend and stuff like that we haven't seen before because it's from another culture. And it's a very fun movie. It's about these people living near the Korvatunturi mountain who discover the true secret behind Santa Claus. And basically, they're drilling a hole into a mountain that they shouldn't be messing with. And of course, what do you think happens? They find evil Santa. And he goes on an evil Santa like rampage. And I think another fun part about this movie is the title, Rare Exports, because by the end of the movie, we see what that means, what they're actually exporting. The film is based on the 2003 short film Rare Exports Incorporated and its 2005 sequel, Rare Exports: The Official Safety Instructions. So yeah, it's a little hard to follow at times because there's a lot of different aspects here. We have like there's a British research team and there's also Americans, and then we have this these local Finnish people, and so it's a little hard to follow at times. But I think it's just really fun with all the different Santa stuff that we have not seen before in our own culture put forth. And I like anytime they do evil Santa. I'm a sucker for that. So that's at number 9, Rare Exports, A Christmas Tale. At number 8, I have The Silent House. Now, this is a Uruguayan horror film directed by Gustavo Hernandez, and the film is supposedly inspired by real events that took place in the 1940s, but nobody can find information on that to authenticate it. And it was a small budget film originally intended for just local audience, but it has achieved great success. Was picked up and shown at the Cannes Film Festival and also at Sundance. And then in 2011, just a year later, they remade the film, or a couple years later. I can't remember. I think it was 2011. They remade the film into just Silent House, and it starred Elizabeth Olsen. It was an English language remake of the film, and it was pretty terrible. Even though Elizabeth Olsen is a good actress, I won't say that the remake is terrible. It's just not as good as this one, and it pales in comparison by far. This one is far more subtle. There's far less exposition and far less of the characters telling you what's happening until you kind of see it for yourself, and it's a gut punch. This is a weird movie. It's kind of a home invasion film that has a little dark secret to it that I don't want to give away. Uh, yeah, I don't want to give anything away about it because it's the whole point of the film is the end of the film, and so we'll just say this: there's a girl named Laura. She's a she arrives at this secluded college with her father Wilson, and they're going to repair this college. Now, the owner Nestor has put the house up for sale, and he tells them that the second level of the house is unstable and it's unsafe to go upstairs. So they spend the night in the house, but they're trying to be careful and not fall through any holes or anything. Well, things start to happen. Ghostly, weird things, noises. You could argue, is something supernatural happen? Is there a killer in the house? Laura finds, she hears this haunting melody playing on the radio, which she turns off, and she goes to check on her father and finds that he's been restrained and murdered downstairs. And so a lot of this movie is just Laura trying to get out of this house and realizing that someone has locked her in and all this other stuff. And it's really great in that cat and mouse sense, but there's more to the story, and you have to stick with this one to the end to get the whole thing. And I've seen this done before in other films to an extent, not to this level. And I would say that it is done far better in this film than any other film I've used this particular or seen this particular plot device used in. Excuse me. And I won't even name the other movies because that would instantly spoil the film. That's one thing people don't realize sometimes when they say, well, I'm not going to spoil the film, but it's just like this. Well, okay, you just told us the film then. Thanks, right? So, yeah, check it out. The Silent House, guys. It's a good Spanish language film. It's known in Spanish as La Casa Muda. If you can't find it as The Silent House, maybe you can find it like that. And we're moving on. At number 7, I have The Crazies. That's right, folks. A remake. I know, I'm terrible. This one is a science fiction horror film directed by Breck Eisner with a screenplay from Scott Kozar and Ray Wright. It is, of course, a remake of the 1973 film of the same name directed by George Romero. It stars Timothy Oliphant, Rhoda Mitchell, Joe Anderson, Danielle Panabaker, and George, who actually wrote and directed the original, did come on board and serve as an executive producer, which, as I say, guys, if you notice, like the Evil Dead remake, the Hills Have Eyes remake, they all have the original directors or creators attached to them as producers, and that's why those remakes turn out better than just a bunch of guys getting together and saying they're going to do something without any input from the original creator, right? And it's not like these guys are so crazy. I mean, just because they made the movie 30 years ago doesn't mean they don't understand that the world has changed and that you can modernize a story without destroying it, right? And I like this one a lot. I think it opens up with a great scene where Timothy Oliphant here, he's playing our town sheriff, and he has to shoot someone at a Little League baseball game, and it kind of kicks everything off. And the people in this movie, they are infected by something. I don't want to give too much away. They get infected by something that's in the water supply. I'll just say that. And it doesn't really turn them into a zombie. It turns them into a psychotic killer, a homicidal maniac. They're not just, they haven't totally lost brain function. They've lost a lot of it, and they are, incoherent and stuff like that, but they still know how to operate machinery. They still know how to pick things up and stab people with them. They're not, zombies in the sense where they're dumb zombies. No, these people are still alive. They have not died yet. And so once, they get infected with this water, we see that there's basically a line going through town from one end of town to the other where people start to become infected. The only thing if I had any problems with this film, I don't like the military aspect of it too much. I think it takes too much away, and they do a couple cheesy, like, satellite shots where they'll say, Ogden Marsh, population, blah blah blah. And it types it out. It's kind of cheesy. It seems like more something you would do in an '80s movie than something from 2010. Uh, but yeah, the performances here are good, especially Joe Anderson's performance as the deputy, who starts off as kind of like Dewey. We kind of see him as like Dewey from Scream, but as the movie progresses, he saves the bacon of a lot of people at different times, and then has a great character arc at the end for him. Uh, some good gore, some good attack scenes here throughout. Some very tense moments when there's a moment when the wife Rhoda Mitchell is strapped to a gurney, also Daniel Panabaker, and this guy is just coming through with a pitchfork, just stabbing people through the chest, and they're just trapped. There's nothing they can do, just sit there and watch. And it's interesting to see how that turns out. Uh, I like this film a lot. Yes, it's a remake, but I think it's one of the rare occasions where I would place this one slightly ahead of the original. I think it's a little bit better than the original, even though it's not perfect. And yeah, great cast, great visual stuff, lots of good gore, all that kind of stuff, and there's a few twists in here I like. The different little stories about the people, the family of the guy that the sheriff has to shoot, and different stuff like that. It's very interesting. And it's also kind of weird because there's moments where they'll take a break from the main story and just start talking about something else. Like there's this guy who kind of goes crazy with his wife and kid, and I don't want to tell you how that ends, but it's a whole scene where they just break from the rest of the story and show you this scene, and then it goes back to the story. It's interesting how they do it, and I like it a lot. So that's what I had for number 7, The Crazies from 2010. Now, this is weird. The 8 through 5 movies are kind of weird because I have a couple. I had The Silent House at number 8, which I told you guys the remake sucked. Then I had The Crazies at number 7, which is a remake. And at number 6, I have yet another remake. I know I'm terrible. These remakes should not be making it onto a top list, right? But they do with me sometimes because I'm less judgmental than other people when it comes to films, I think. So let's talk about what I have at number 6. Let Me In, guys. That's right. Let Me In, the English language remake of Let the Right One In, which is a great film. And, on its list alone, it was in the top 2 or 3 for me for that year. But this one is also very good. It's hard not to love it. It's, a American British remake of the original. It was written and directed by Matt Reeves, of course, and it stars Cody Smith McPhee, Chloe Grace Moretz, Elias Koteas, and the great Richard Jenkins. So it's got a knockout cast. It's got a great story. I don't think they missed too far with the story on the remake here. They do change it a little bit. The setting is changed, and some of the different aspects of the kids are changed, but not much. It's just changed enough to be socially acceptable in another culture, I guess is what you would say. Um, yeah, I mean, interest of producing an English language version of Let the Right One In began like right after it came out. Like as soon as people saw this movie, they were at it lined up for an English language remake. There was no doubt about it. It's one of the best vampire films ever made. And so this is basically the same story. I mean, it's set in Los Alamos, New Mexico, and we see a disfigured man taken to the hospital, and police detective played by Elias Koteas, who's always great, tries to question him about a recent murder. When the detective answers a call outside the room, the disfigured man jumps out of the window, leaving behind a note that reads, "I'm sorry, Abby." And we go from here. We learn the story of what's going on here, and it is a vampire story and one of the best ever, right? Uh, I kind of consider this as just being a different storyteller, telling the same story, and the story still being pretty damn good. I don't think, like I said, in a lot of these films, it seems like no matter even if it's shot for shot, that there's just something lost in the translation when they get, to me when they become an English language film. I think in this one, Matt Reeves nails this, and it's also pretty easy to see, how talented this guy is. He's able to perfectly capture, uh, in my opinion, the atmosphere of an entirely separate place that even looks completely different. And So kudos to him for that. A damn good film, guys. It's a remake. Yeah, I know. At number 6, let me in. At number 5, we're going back to my original position, which is that remakes are bad because we are talking about We Are What We Are. That's right, the Cannibal movie. And we are talking about the original version of that because even though I like the remake, and it has Michael Parks in it, which is definitely worth watching anytime you get a chance to watch Michael Parks perform and have like a big leading role. You always want to do that. So this one, though, is a Spanish language film, and it's a Mexican horror film directed by Jorge Miquel Grau. I think I'm saying that right. And a standalone sequel to Kronos from 1993. The film is about a family who, after the death of the father, try to continue on a disturbing ritualistic tradition. The film stars Poliana Gatin and Daniel Jimenez Cacho, the latter of whom reprises his role from Kronos. So if you didn't know that, yeah, guys, it's a somewhat of a sequel, right, to Kronos. Even though it's not mentioned much in here, and it's not exactly the same story either, right? Uh, but here we have a family who loses one of their members early on, and so slowly we start to realize this family is not exactly what they appear to be, right? Uh, the police start to figure out a little something about the dead family member, like not through actual investigation, just kind of like luck. They discover this about this. The dad dies in the family, and the detectives that are asked to solve this case, they find a finger inside. Well, actually, the coroner finds a finger uh, inside the dad's stomach. And so that's where it all picks up, and we start to realize that there is something going on in this town with this family that's not normal. It's a very good film. I don't know if I totally understand the end. Like, I get it, but I think I just would have done it differently. Is what I mean. I don't think I would have done it the same way. And they did change it a little bit in the English language remake, but I wouldn't necessarily say they changed it for the better. This one's pretty damn good. So yeah, that's We Are What We Are, a great cannibal film at number 6. And yeah, I like the original better than the remake. I like it a lot better than or it's at number 5. Excuse me. I like it a lot better than the remake because I just think that the remake doesn't carry the atmosphere that the original does. The performance from Michael Parks in it is very good, as the kind of like coroner who's figuring stuff out. But I just think the original's better. And we'll leave it at that. Moving on to number 4. One of my only theatrical releases on this list. At number 4, I have Insidious. I really liked Insidious a lot when it came out. I think that the whole thing's been done to death at this point. But yeah, when it was originally released, I liked Insidious a lot. Uh, it kind of took me back to the old movies of like the Amityville Horror and stuff like that. When I was a kid, they had tons of Amityville Horror movies, and similar movies like Poltergeist and House and stuff like that. And so Insidious originally, when I first saw this one and The Conjuring, those two films I enjoyed a great deal. The sequels and the spin-offs and all that, some of them are okay, some of them are pretty lacking. I think Insidious 3 was pretty good, but that's, they're not as strong as the originals. And I think that's because, in my mind, this was never intended to be like a series of films. Insidious, of course, is directed by James Wan, written by his buddy Lee Wanell, and it stars Patrick Wilson and Rose Byrne and Barbara Hershey. And it's the first installment in the Insidious franchise that goes on, and they have 3 more of these. I think there's probably even going to be another one at some point. At some point, they just kind of gave up on trying to keep a story going. I think around part 3, they said, let's just, we don't have to have Patrick Wilson and Rose Byrne. We'll just do Lynn Shay, and we'll just show different stories from her time, whatever. I'm not a big fan of like part 2 and part 4. I just didn't think they worked very well. But this one's a very interesting concept because, we get that classic line. It's now a classic line done in this film of, it's not your house that's haunted. It's your son. Dun 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 dun. Right? And there's all kinds of little fun Easter eggs in here from other James Wan films. Uh, but yeah, and the great jump scare. We all remember the great Darth Maul jump scare, right? The creature that looks like Darth Maul. I think there's some genuinely creepy stuff in this movie. Is when when the father crosses over into the further or whatever they call it, and this place inhabited by the tortured souls of the dead. There's some pretty creepy stuff in there. Some pretty creepy imagery. In the end, man, I almost wish they hadn't made any more of these because I like the end a lot. I think the end is not something that you see coming with this. You think it's going to be very much poltergeist like, where we just save Carol Ann and we all get back to normalcy till the next film, right? This one doesn't take that route, and that makes it difficult when they do the sequel. I think to you have to spend the first half of that movie shaking things out so people even understand what's going on from the last one. And yeah, so I wasn't a big fan of part 2 or part 4, but this one works. I like The Conjuring and Insidious, the originals. I think now looking back, people say, "Oh my God, it's been done to death," but this is a spell of where things were kind of dry for that, because we just had like Paranormal Activity, and Paranormal Activity 2 came out this year. So those were the kind of supernatural films we were getting. These just handheld cam supernatural films that are basically ripping off the paranormal boom that happened with everybody running around with a camera trying to catch a ghost on tape. And this one's different. It's old school. It goes back to original filmmaking and all that stuff. So, yep, big fan. I like it a lot. At number 4, I have Insidious. At number 3, guys, this one's rough. This one, this one's not gonna win me any fans, and I'm gonna have to explain myself. But at number 3, I should say, I have a Serbian film. That's right, and I know this one is like, people will shut this off right now and probably never listen to anything else I have to say because of that pick. There are some people that hate this movie that much, and I understand. It's definitely not for everyone. It's not. When I say it's not for everyone, I mean it's not for most people, right? It's a exploitation horror film produced and directed by Sordan Spoljevic in his feature film debut. Spoljevic also co-wrote the film with Alexander Radovajev, and it tells the story of a financially struggling ex-porn star who agrees to participate in a art film, only to discover that he has been drafted into a snuff film and a pedophilic and necrophilic nightmare, right? And when he refuses to participate at certain points, he is drugged. And I think the real crazy parts of this movie is like when he is able to find the tapes of what's been going on, and he watches the tapes. Because you can imagine watching these things happen and being disgusted, but to watch yourself do them takes a whole nother turn, right? Yeah, there is some bad stuff in this movie that nobody should have to see. The pedophilia and stuff like that. Did they go over the top with it? I guess you could do that. You could say it's over the top because I don't know. To me, it's up to the artist. He had something to say here, and he did have something to say. It's not just a shock film. He talks about, if you've ever seen an interview with him, he talks about how his country has basically been treated like this for years. He feels like the entire country's been raped by its own government, by outside governments interfering, including, I guess North American governments like the United States would be one that he would be talking about. But yeah, it's a very powerful film. When I first saw this movie, you get through all the shock stuff and everything. The first idea that hit me about the film, though, was, how has no one ever done this before? How has nobody made this movie? An ex-porn star gets lured into making what he thinks is just a rough porn film, and it becomes a fucking nightmare. Now, that is an original idea, but at the same time, it's like one that should be slapping people in the face, right? We've seen some other people do stuff like this. Like, there's a trilogy of films called Amateur Porn Star Killer, and there's some other films similar to a Serbian film, Life and Death of a Porno Gang. But there's nothing that does what Serbian film does on the level that it does it. I remember the first time I saw this film, I wanted to, immediately unplug my laptop and throw it into the swimming pool outside because I was like, what the fuck is this? That last scene, especially because you're not, you think you're kind of a sucker in this movie because it just progressively gets worse. And so it's like, you should realize that they're planning something big for the end, something horrifying. And I think, to me, the most horrifying thing in the whole film is not any of the imagery. It's not any of the thing that's said. Because a lot of the effects are done so poorly that you can tell they're fake. I think they're done like that on purpose because the film is shot beautifully, but the effects are kind of terrible in different places because they want you to know it's not real. They didn't want a, Ruggero Deodato situation where they got drugged into court and had to prove that people weren't murdered and stuff like that. So they wanted to make sure people knew it wasn't real. It's just a story. But at the same time, it's real in the sense that it's a metaphor for some things that have really happened to people. And I don't know. I like it a lot. I like the film. I would never watch it again. That's crazy, right? I've seen this movie 1.5 times. I watched it once the night that I saw it. About 4 or 5 years later, somebody else wanted to see it, and I put it on and watched about, I wouldn't even say half. I watched it till it started to get rough, and then I was like, I cannot watch this movie with another person. I just can't. I don't want to watch it by myself again. But it's not something like you'll ever forget it just because you only watched it once. I can tell you that. You will never forget the stuff in this movie. And I think what's important to not forget is the fact that, what do you want to do? What do you want to do, guys? You want to start banning stuff? You want to say this is okay, that's not okay? That's fine, but let me tell you something. When you do that, you hit a line that, the further that line slides backwards, the more destruction is caused to art. And the more art that never gets made because of the very implication of it. So you have to be careful where you limit people and what you limit them with. I think, we put ratings on these movies for a reason. We have people like me running around talking about these movies for a reason. And the reason is because some of these movies aren't for everybody. And like I said, a Serbian film is really for no one. And even though I have only seen it 1.5 times, I give this movie like 8.5 out of 10. I think it's a great fucking horror movie. Just not the easiest one to watch, right? Moving on, guys. Number 2, I have Dream Home. This is a fun little slasher film I've talked about a lot recently, so I'm not going to talk too much about it this time. It's a film about a woman who is trying to buy her dream home, a Hong Kong horror film, and she's saving up the money to buy this home on the Victorian Harbor in Hong Kong, and the people who own the home, they jack up the price on her. It's basically like a condo inside a giant swanky building. And so she goes on a freaking rampage. She decides that if she kills a bunch of people who live in this building, the price might drastically drop and she'll be able to get her dream home. This is one of the most fun movies of all time, guys. It's serious in points. It takes itself serious. But it's almost like a black comedy with the slasher stuff. I mean, this shit is so intense, and it's stuff that you've never seen before in any slasher movie. Just crazy, crazy stuff. Great effects, great blood, great gore, all that stuff. If you like hardcore slasher films, go check out Dream Home. It's an all-time favorite of mine in that subgenre. So we're moving on. And the last one, guys, I'm not going to talk about it very long either because I've talked about it on here several times before in other lists and things like that. And it is I Saw the Devil. In my opinion, I Saw the Devil is the best Batman movie ever. I know, that's crazy. It's not... It doesn't make any sense, right? Well, it does to me because this movie kind of plays out like Batman versus the Joker in real life or something. We see this horrible, psychotic serial killer, part-time cannibal, murder this guy's girlfriend, his fiance, and he just happened to kill the wrong girl because this guy is a South Korean secret agent who goes, played by Byung-hyun Kim, I believe, and he goes on the warpath with this guy, and he doesn't hunt him down and kill him, which is what you would expect, right? He hunts him down and he starts to follow him. And every time this guy will try to do something crazy or horrible to somebody, this guy will just break in, out of nowhere and beat the hell out of him, break his arm, just mess him up. And then he lets him go to do something else. And he follows him and follows him and follows him. And this seems like a pretty interesting plan until the bad guy here figures out what's going on. He figures out that he's being tracked and that he's being listened to and that someone out there has realized what he's done. And so he goes into retaliation mode, and that's when the film gets really interesting. This guy is insane, and he is willing to do anything just to mess with somebody for messing with him, similar to the Joker, right? Uh, it's a great film all the way around. Great action in this, even though it's, in my opinion, I know it's, I'm putting it in my horror films. If you're a horror fan, you have to see this, and it does have elements like the serial killer element. There's a cannibal element. There's all kinds of crazy stuff going on in this film, and that's beside just the imagery and stuff that we see that is insane. And of course, it has a great finish, a final scene. I think this is one of those rare films, like one of the rare films out there that when they talk about violence, does it glorify violence to a degree, because it's such, the director who shows it to us is such a visually outstanding director, that yeah, it does, I guess, glorify it a little bit. But in the same sense, by the time we, if you pay attention to the story, by the time we get to the end here, uh, we realize that it's not really glorifying violence. It is trying to give you the message that regardless of how sinister or horrible something is that somebody did to somebody else, that revenge often just leaves you with nothingness or makes things worse. Even in this case, if the road of revenge that this guy sets down ends up leaving a path of destruction that he was not expecting. He thought he would just go out and fuck with this guy and that would be the end of it, not realizing that, you know, to begin with, that the guy you're fucking with is a psychopath. You know what I mean? That's how he functions. That's why we're here in the first place, because he's fucking crazy. And so I think this film works on a lot of levels and makes you think about violence instead of just showing it to you. And great movie, guys. I Saw the Devil, and that was at number one. Now, we're going to run down the honorable mentions just real quick. I'm leaving a lot of them out, guys. There's going to be a lot of bad, you know, schlocky films I don't talk about that I usually do. Like, I'm not going to talk about 30 Days a Night 2 or 2001 Maniacs 2. I'm not going to talk about Bereavement. See, I just threw all those in there without talking about them. Black Swan is one that I was borderline on. For me, it's not truly horror, but I do like it, and I do see it in that vibe, the horror vibe. Of course, there was the Cold Prey prequel. Dream Home, which I forgot to mention, was directed by Peng Ho Shung. I forgot to mention that part. It starred Josie Ho, Izan Chan, and Derek Sang. I've talked about this film several times before, so I tried to get through that as quickly as possible. We also had a Hatchet sequel, Hatchet 2, which is a pretty good one. I think it's one of the better ones. The Last Exorcism was an interesting film, but it ultimately wasn't one of my favorites. My Soul to Take, which was an interesting film from Wes Craven that wasn't very good, but it was interesting. It was, you know, every now and then, no matter how old Wes got, he was willing to dip into like a certain well, and this time it just didn't seem to work. Nightmare on Elm Street remake, which I don't hate near as much as everyone else does. I understand that it's not as good as what people wanted it to be, but I don't fucking hate it. Paranormal Activity sequel, Piranha 3D, were some, you know, those were fun. Rabies was a fun movie that I almost thought about putting in here, a fun foreign film. The Reef was decent. Rubber, which is a funny movie about a damn tire. That's all I can say. A haunted, possessed tire, maybe, I guess. It, like, focuses on people and they blow the fuck up. Saw 3D, which is like, thank God that's the last one they're making for a while because they really fucked that up. Stakeland was an interesting indie film. Yeah, so there was some other ones like John Carpenter's The Ward. It had Daniel Panabaker and Amber Heard in it. I kind of liked that one a little bit, but you know, in the end for me it was just kind of more the same. The Wolfman from 2010 with Benicio del Toro and Anthony Hopkins. You know, I like it, but it's also kind of a letdown for me. I don't know why. It doesn't do anything really well for me. It does. The transformations are too CGI. I don't want to see transformations that are that CGI. I don't mind if you add a little bit, but I want to see some practical effects in my transformations. And this is why werewolf movies rarely work, is because you have to have, you know, somebody to play the tortured soul who can really nail it, a great actor, which they had here with Benicio, although I don't know that he was right for this role. And, you know, you have to be able to do the effects in a way where people will at least look at it and be like, okay, I can deal with that moving forward in the story. And I think it's just too too CGI here. They go too far into modern stuff with the CGI, and then they fall too far back into like old timey. This is old timey before old timey. Even the last Wolfman movie, right? Or the original Wolfman movie. Excuse me. Uh, but yeah, that's all we got for 2010, guys. It's been fun. I've had a great time going down these lists with you guys, and if I missed something, by all means, yell at me. The only thing I could think of that I left off the list was Cold Fish, which is a Japanese crime horror film, and so that's why I didn't put it in there. It seems like it's more of a crime film. It's like if you were watching uh, uh, like a mini series, but it was done on the History Channel or A&E or something when they're trying to teach you something while they show you a movie, right? So it's kind of like based on a real crime. Other than that, it is super fucked up. It's got some great like dismemberment scenes and stuff like that where they're getting rid of bodies. And it also has a good performance here from basically a guy who goes full Straw Dog. I mean, he goes full Dustin Hoffman from Straw Dog, cracked glasses and everything, right? So, yeah, guys, that's all we got for this week. We will talk to you soon. We're going to start just doing them once a week. We spread them out a little bit. We were doing them too fast. I started to realize we were going to hit the end of our countdown before we hit the end of the year, like by a month and a half or something. So I've slowed it down. We're just going to do one of these a week. And that's all we got for this week. Next week, we'll be talking about 2011, the top 10 horror films from 2011. And we will talk to you guys the next time we've got something worth talking about. Bye.